And now I'd like everybody to put on their entrepreneurial cap, because starting a think tank with a business model is only the half of it. The other part is money, funding. How are you going to get your projects off the ground, pay your staff? It's a little anxiety inducing, but thankfully our next session will help you think about ways your think tank idea can get off the ground and be sustainable. With the generous support of the Acton Institute, who has sponsored this session, our next panel of speakers will share with you their varied experience on how they've generated revenue for their think tanks. To lead this panel, I'd like to call on Executive Director at Center for Indonesian Policy Studies, Rainer Heufers. Rainer, take it away.
Thank you very much, Antea. Thank you very much, Tom, for your presentation just now. So we're getting slightly more technical now. We have had lots of discussions about public policies and everything, but we're also people working in think tanks, and sometimes we need to talk about the management issues that we are facing. So while they are putting the chairs on the stage, just briefly, so we heard about what to consider when you start a think tank, what to consider when you run a think tank. It's about management issues. We need to discuss human resource management issues. We have communication challenges that we need to address. We need to basically be on top of almost everything that a normal company needs to be also on top of. And if we are not effective in research, then we're not functioning as a think tank. If we're not working effectively in communications, then we might do great research, but nobody knows we exist and we become irrelevant. So we have to be good at all these things that we are doing. And indeed, the Atlas Network is incredibly helpful training think tanks in all these various aspects. And we had the fundraising training just before this Asia Liberty Forum, and you saw the elevator pitches yesterday that were the people that participated in that fundraising training. Now, fundraising. One thing about fundraising is that you need to be able to speak to people who are interested in what you're doing, or get them interested in what you're doing, and convince them that an investment in your organization is the right thing to do. That is quite often associated with individuals, people who have the money to actually support you in this, and other resources as well. It is also about making grants and getting donations from foundations, etc. But that's not where it stops. Quite often we only talk about that. We need to also talk about other ways of generating revenues for our think tanks, and that's what we want to do on this panel. And for that purpose, I would like now to invite our panelists to come on stage. First of all, Ms. Ayesha Bilal from the Prime Institute, the Chief Operating Officer, here with us today. Come on stage, please. Ayesha. Our second panelist is Robin Sitoula, Chief Executive Officer of the Samriddhi Foundation in Kathmandu, Nepal. Our third panelist is Gulmira Aidaralieva from the Central Asian Free Market Institute in Kyrgyzstan. Welcome on stage, Gulmira. And last but not least, Mr. Juergen Keitel from AirAsia, based in Malaysia, fellow German. Finally, I have another German on stage. Please take your seat. What I would like to do is I'd like to just ask them a few questions first, but then we really go into the discussion with everybody here. As usual, there are volunteers who are able to help with microphones so that you are able to actually address the panelists here. So thank you very much, all four of you, to come and join us here today. So as I said, it's not all about grants and donations. It's really also about other business models. And I've been not as long as Tom, but also a long time in the freedom movement. And I've seen many, many different models that were used. For example, we have seen the Unirule Institute in Beijing. Long time ago, they started trying a consultancy to make some more money so that the whole thing becomes more sustainable. We have had many other approaches. For example, I visited recently Myanmar, and I spoke to the friends from the Yangon School of Political Science. They run their own printing house. They make actually money with printing books and other things themselves. Find that highly interesting. Also in Yangon, there's a group that is selling facilitation and training services, making money that way, just to maintain the institute and maybe cover some basic costs for their organization. So there are various ideas of what else can be done besides doing the important thing of going for grants and donations. So I want to go beyond those two things. So my very first question would be, what are your experiences with starting your own business on the side? I mean, these questions may be targeted at only one or two of you with that experience, but everybody is very, very welcome to chip in with this as well. But let me start this directly with Robin here, because Robin has started a couple of businesses besides Samriddhi. And so that question, I start with you, Robin. Yeah, what are the experiences with starting your own business? How has that worked parallel to having the Samriddhi Foundation, and what were your experiences?
Right. Check. Yeah. Thank you, Rainer. I'm very, very glad to share this, share the things that we do silently under the radar, and this is the first time we're able, talking about this publicly. I've been engaged with Samriddhi Foundation for 12 years now, since the beginning, and in the last 12 years, not just Samriddhi Foundation, but we've also started many other initiatives, which some of you might know and some of you might not be aware of. So currently, in total, we have, in addition to Samriddhi, we have other 5 companies that were incubated alongside. And some are like 5, 6 years old, and some are younger, and some are doing good, and some are just starting up. So that's kind of the background. And then there are 2 other new companies that are likely to come up this year. So there are 2 in the making. I have to tell you that these are all service-based companies. So that basically provides different kind of services. But there is an element of liberty in each of these service-based companies. And I would like to share you quickly the story of how this started and what happened. And I'm telling this story because maybe as each organizations grow, we roughly go through more or less the same stage or same growth pattern because we are all in the business of think tanks. So as we started building Samriddhi and as we started getting noticed, as we started building our brand, we started earning reputation. And as we started earning reputation, say, for example, one of the reputation that we had was these young researchers, coming with research and data and, making a case. So we started getting a lot of requests in the market saying, hey, can you get us a resource on this? We'll pay you to do this. Or can you get us data on this? We'll pay you to do this. And we said, no, somebody can't do this because, whatever we do have to be aligned to the mission of what we do. We don't do nonsense. But then we could see there is so many, people wanting us to do that. And we thought, oh, maybe we could set up a company to do that for you. And we set up a company called Facts, which specializes in data and research. And it's completely based on the market. In its own way, Facts, as a company, promotes more information so that people can make better choices. So the whole idea is around choices. So it connects to the work that we do. And then we also, in our development stage, we are very popular about entrepreneurship programs. And then the small, medium enterprises started approaching us saying, we are enterprises, we need support. And we're like, what kind of support? And they're like, can you help us figure out our human resource strategy? Or can you help us figure out our profitability? And then we were like, somebody that doesn't do that. But we set up a company called Lead that works with entrepreneurs. And then we started getting requests for videos and documentaries. And we set up a film company called Onion Films, so on and so forth. So that's how we set up the companies. In the beginning, we had no idea if we would be setting up the companies, but as opportunities came in, we saw money, and we needed money everywhere. And that was the reason why we set up the company. The way these companies are set up is once we kind of recognize there is minimum viable product, as to put it in Tom's word, just the previous conversation. As we see that opportunity, we also scout for a team member within the foundation who might be interested to build business around that, or someone who is passionate to build that business. And if there is a match of ideas and a person who would build it, we we start with that person. Initially, we incubate it in our own office, we mentor, and then we move it forward. But the model is completely value exchange model, and you might be thinking there might be shares of somebody onto that company or this or that. It's not how it works. All of these companies are all independent. They have their own team members. They have their own structures, cultures, attitudes, everything, and they're separate from the Samriddhi Foundation office.
Can I come in there with a question? Because what I've seen in the past in certain think tanks is that when you be a not-for-profit think tank and you have a for-profit unit, that can actually interfere and that can cause problems. You have it completely separated.
So just to pick it on Reiner's point, at one point in time, one of our company and the think tank was together. And the think tank was being too dependent on the company. They're like, if the company brings in work, we'll do it. Otherwise, we'll read, and we have all the books in the library, right? And then when there was work and overwhelming, the company people would say, "Gus, I mean, we have to feed these people. There are potential tensions," and we systematically realized that, and we separated the companies, and we learned it that we have to keep them separate. And also, I was talking about cultures and attitudes, if you noted a while ago, because the culture or the attitude to go out and sell in the market and create a value and sell every day is very different than doing a think tank work, honestly. The psychologies are different. At Samriddhi, we hate government. At the consulting company, we don't hate the government. It could be our potential client. It teaches us a lot of, other side or other humanities. But then, considering the time, I'll just, want to make short points right away. I have to tell you honestly that whether this model is successful or not, we don't know. We're experimenting it. We're too young to say whether this model is successful. There have been three advantages. The biggest advantage is that our voice is louder. Once upon a time, there used to be only one group called Samriddhi Foundation in Nepal that was pro-free market. Today, that is not the case. There are 10 or 12. So the voice is louder. And then this also offers a lot of opportunities to team members because people who work with us, they learn to enjoy freedom. They don't want to go and work with a socialist group. Right? And so there are other companies that can offer that opportunity for people. So that way it helps us in retaining people. And so people take a break, go to the consulting company, 2 years, they come back to the think tank. It's always that case. And that's always been useful for us. And in addition to that, more importantly, these companies make profit, which is beautiful. And a part of the profit, they donate it to the think tank. And it helps us do what we want to do. And so therefore, we're finding it interesting and we'd like to do more. I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Are the others having thoughts on it?
We don't have separate business, but we do also commercial research several times in a year just to make sure that our administrative costs will be covered by them, because when you depend on grants, your budget is very limited and the type where you can spend this money, or you can be flexible on it. But when you have extra money from your commercial part, we don't do it very often, and we really choose what we can do and what we can't do. For example, to do some surveys for companies, for foreign companies or for local companies, just to market research. It's also helpful for us to understand better market and also work more with business community and to later involve for our activities too. So that's how we build, first of all, trust. Secondly, it's profit. And with, our price is much lower than other commercial companies. That's how we also
Yeah, thank you, Gulmira. That's nice. That takes us right away to my next question, but more to the second business model that I will to talk about is exactly that. And that's quite a few think tanks in the movement that are actually approaching companies for that, for market research, market surveys. So that's being offered. And this has, in some cases, been successful, and in other cases, has not been successful. Ayesha, how was that for you?
So thank you very much, Rainer, and thank you, Atlas, for having me here. And assalamu alaikum, everyone. So my story is a little, our story, Prime story is not a very ideal one, but there are obviously lessons to be learned from there. Can I just explain the rationale behind the product and why we introduced it? So the rationale was based on the idea by Ali Salman on, he also gave a presentation on this on the fundraising training, why products can be better for think tanks instead of projects. The two main benefits would be that, so when you're talking about projects, they are funded by donors, but donors are not your beneficiaries or your target audience, right? So there is naturally a gap. So beneficiaries are not really paying for the benefits that they're getting out of your outputs, and the stakeholders, the target audience, as the policymakers, they do not necessarily want the outputs that you're generating. So there is naturally a gap. And other than that, products can also help in sustainability instead of projects, because projects you have to rely on donors, donating every time, and you have to write proposals, and you have to bet on, whether it's going to be accepted or not. But once you have a credible product in the market, you can market it, and you have those subscribers or your consumers who are going to consume it. So that was basically the idea behind introducing a product for Prime. And if I just explain a little bit about the product was basically a monthly subscription-based publication. It was a research report, and it was based on an annual subscription. And so the idea was that there is a demand for research, for some actionable intelligence within the private sector, but they do not want to delve into academic papers, which are very lengthy and very, technical for them, but they do not also want to just search off the internet and get something, not very reliable. So we had to maintain that balance. We had to be reliable in terms of our research, and also provide some quality research in a very simple language that the private sector could understand. So this was based on, our own networking, and there was clearly a demand for this. So over time, we introduced this product. We had a marketing strategy of, going to our network and having mass emails, cold calls, and a lot of other strategies were implemented. But unfortunately, over the period of 2 years, we were not able to, increase our subscription base to as much as we hoped for. There were naturally costs not only associated with the actual production of this report every month, but also costs associated with the marketing of this product. Because if you want to tap to the right people, it means that the senior person or somebody who really understands the business has to make presentations to that group and on a very regular basis. And for that, of course, you need resources, and you need that person to be completely occupied with that particular task. So over time, it became, the cost kind of exceeded the benefits. And our subscribers were a little unhappy that we had to discontinue the product. But, that's the decision that we had to take eventually.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that, because, it is really not helpful only to talk about best cases and success stories. Some things sometimes don't work. Yeah. And sometimes you need to start 5 things, 4 fail, right, but that one thing flourishes.
If I could just add a little bit, sure. But it was not all unsuccessful, because during the time that we had to, do the marketing strategy, and we had to come up with this product, and we had to please our consumers, we really understood the value of, branding and product standardization. Because of course we were a very young think tank, and we had these considerations. But when you have direct consumers who read your, analysis and give you direct feedback, instead of just having a seminar and people not directly engaging with you in that sense, so that really gave us a very clear feedback on our analysis, and we were really able to improve on ourselves. So it was not all a loss. It was really helped us in that sense.
Yeah, thank you. At least I have a lot of questions in that regard, but later we can discuss this in a broader way. Right now, I would like to look at the perspective of the industry. Juergen, from your perspective, what do corporations need? What would you potentially expect from a think tank? For us, it's also always a question of measuring success. So ultimately, I guess, in my experience, industries would be interested that certain regulations get changed. But then again, for us to write a proposal, we'll have the regulation changed by March 2018, might be slightly over-promising. So we have to kind of like find out what is realistically achievable so that we don't over-promise and under-deliver, etc. That, I think, is something that all of us need to figure out on our side. I'm interested in the perspective from you, from the industry.
Thank you. Does this work? Yeah, I guess that works. First of all, thanks for having me and having us here on the stage this afternoon. We're very pleased to be here, especially sort of trying to give a little bit the industry perspective and coming from sort of like an airline, which is a very operational background, but from an entrepreneurial background. I think let's go one step back. We all talk about think tanks, but what is a think tank? We know consultants, we know foundations, we know industry associations, we know business partners, we know government entities. We'll deal with a lot of different stakeholders, and then suddenly you have think tanks. So you go, ooh, what's a think tank? And I think the question is really around what was mentioned before. What is the goal, what is the objective, and what is the need? Because obviously you can fulfill surveys through consultants, you can have direct engagement with the government entities, you can have relationships with all of these different partners, you can be part of an industry association and so, but I think when you look at it and when you look at the challenges and the needs, it's really threefold. The first one is having a larger visionary scope. That means, what is the interest? For us in Asia, very much so being visionaries and having our co-founders, Tan Sri Doni Fernandez and Dato Ding Maran, Kamarudin Maran, really founding that company 16 years ago with that vision, now everyone can fly, with the vision of affordable fares, with the vision of connectivity in Asia and ASEAN across. How can you expand on that, and how can you sort of like try to also loosen up certain regulations and forming a community which supports connectivity, and also highlighting the message about how important is aviation in the region, how important, what contribution does that have to the economy, to tourism, and to the growth of communities. So, and I think there, what has always been sort of then missing is a little bit that independent voice. That voice where we say it doesn't have to be actually a consultant which sort of replicates our views, because we need an institution which actually has independent, credible research and has also the ears of institutions like government entities, which probably then also sort of advances the agenda and certain topics on a fairly high basis. I think we don't, especially since the aviation industry is very much regulated and it all can be very technical, we don't need technical experts, we don't need technical consultants to change the business process. What the think tanks can actually provide is sort of the bigger picture. What is the impact to the national economies? What is the impact to the consumers, to the society of certain changes, or of regulations and of laws, and how can that change the mindset and the shape? So it's independent. It is also the message. Does the message have the right ear? It could have different audiences, and also the understanding. That means, is that message being spread? Sometimes a report is nice, but a report, how many people read reports these days? How big are reports? How scientific are they? How many people can understand them? So the last point really is then, how can that message be easily distributed so that the media world can understand it, the society can understand it, and mindsets can be really changed, or at least the topic can be understood and awareness can be created.
Thank you. Do the other three have a question or a comment? While you think about that, now I also open up to the audience. If you have questions to the panelists here in the front, either on the existing business models that we have discussed, or maybe you have additional ideas for other business models that you've seen being used and would like to introduce them to us, anything would be quite interesting for us. Think about it, and please indicate that you would like to ask a question. Yes, Gulmira.
All like business models, they're like part of some associations. So you talked about like bigger picture. But for example, in the case of Kyrgyz Republic, most of the entrepreneur businessmen, they're already part of some associations and they're already paying membership fees. So, and these associations represent them for decision makers when something happens, or they want to promote your interest there. So you told that you're expecting from think tanks bigger picture. Do they this association provide for you already this picture, and what's the difference will be?
I think the difference is really when we talk the sort of long-term visionary bigger picture is going away from the technical or the business sort of related processes of a business, where you have experts, where you have consultants who can build you up. This is more going down what impact does the actual industry, and not only the individual company, the individual airline, but for the entire industry have on the economy of a region, of a city, of a country. That means we then also look at, I can give you an example, often when you look at infrastructure, it's been looked at ground infrastructure, it's been looked at ports, it's been looked at very, very big, large projects. But aviation is often being sort of neglected as the sort of self-running kind of business by governments. And we think, no, there is definitely a need also to put that awareness to society that aviation is highly regulated and aviation needs to have some sort of support and input by governments. And that is not only for the individual company, but that is for the entire industry.
Yeah, the reason why I ask, because we work for a non-visa regime for as a country for Kyrgyzstan. And we were so surprised when we talk with different airlines, touristic agencies, and actually just two of them, they support us. Other companies, they were against it because it was their personal interest to get visa because they have more customers. So that's the reason why, how to identify sometimes when companies, they put their general interests bigger than their own interests.
Well, it depends. Obviously, a company will always look at their own interests. But then looking at the bigger picture and looking at developments already. We're looking here, for example, at the developments in ASEAN, and those developments have been ongoing so many, many times, and we're very much supporting the implementation framework on building ASEAN connectivity and growing. Of course, there will be always different interests. That means, yes, there will some be pros, some will be con, but if you look at, then that's where think tanks can come in at this sort of higher level of benefits to the consumer, choice. What can a more open market provide? Can it have a positive impact on safety? And what are the levers? That means what are the common denominators in the industry so that you can say, okay, this goes beyond the individual competition. This is where we can see sort of the benefits then come out.
I guess it also depends on the nature of the association or the chamber. You sometimes have them as a cartel of domestic players trying to block everybody else. And sometimes they're actually facilitators of business. And then it depends on the company. In this case, it's a private company entering a market of government players. So that's certainly a difference when you talk to another type of airline. Talking about chambers, I see Linda is here. Linda, you remember that end of last year we were in DC and we spoke to that lady from the Mexican think tank who told us about the chambers in, I think it was Mexico, if I'm not mistaken. Would you share that? That's another interesting example of how that works in Mexico, that they go through the chambers and actually support think tanks through chambers.
I'm just searching back through my mind. Is this? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, she was really interesting because going to businesses, they don't always want to support you directly, but people in the Chamber of Commerce usually have some things in common with what you're trying to achieve. So they would have events where they would ask members of the Chambers of Commerce to come to. So they got to know the Chambers of Commerce, and it would be on different issues. And then at some point, I think they asked the Chamber of Commerce, rather than the individuals, whether any of the individual companies would be interested in supporting this or that. So the companies would say, yes, they'd put $100 or $500 or whatever it was towards this project. and then the Chamber of Commerce would give the money to the organisation. I mean, you obviously need a friendly Chamber of Commerce, but making friends with them is quite important, and I'm sure some of you do it. But it was interesting because it enabled the members to not be able to be identified for having supported a specific thing. And as you can imagine, in some countries, and anyway, members might be keen on a certain thing, but didn't particularly want their company to be associated with it. And obviously they'd found it very successful, really having a good relationship to the Chamber of Commerce, and then having different events for different members, and then seeing what they could put together, and they raised quite a lot of money from it.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. And she was quite surprised to hear that other countries don't have that. For them, it was the most normal thing. So chambers have a certain group of think tanks that they support, and the money comes from the individual members of the chamber. Yes.
Maybe also to add to that, when a think tank is engaged or a study is engaged, it doesn't also mean that the outcome must be just pro for the individual company like ourselves. It just means that a debate and a discussion is being launched, which provides sort of a platform to actually build on that. So it doesn't, and that is, I think, the importance about the independence, is to say, this is not just coming from one angle or one side. This is actually an independent sort of study or an independent kind of visionary way forward, how that debate can then change certain steps and implement changing the mindsets.
Yeah, Ayesha.
If I can just add to that, because we have had some experience working with the pharmaceutical sector, and we did some research for them, and I think you're absolutely right. Sometimes they also want a platform where their discussion at least takes place, because they were really frustrated that the government was not listening to them at all. So they didn't mind that even if the debate was like going this way or that way, there has to be some place that they can voice their concerns, and somebody like Prime, an independent think tank which had no bias in either way. So that platform definitely provides a bridge between the government and the private sector. So it's a win-win situation.
Right. No questions or comments at the moment. In a while, I will ask you who else has products and not just projects in their think tanks. Maybe some of you could help us by commenting on your own experiences. But before we go there, a question to Gulmira, because there is one. Oh, sorry, I can't see you. Yes, Nupur.
I just wanted to
Could you identify yourself quickly?
I'm Nupur Hasija from the Friedrich Naumann Foundation, New Delhi. Just wanted to share experience that we have in India. We have this CSR, corporate social responsibility, where all the companies are supposed to share 2% profit for the as a social responsibility. So there are many agencies that have come up in India who try to bridge between the corporates and the NGO sectors, because corporates wouldn't know, they don't know where to invest and who are the credible organizations. So instead of having a bogus social organization on their own, they would like to really invest on where work is really going on. So that's very much going on in India. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you, Nupur. Rings a bell here in Indonesia. There's a law. Every company has to spend, 2%, I think, of the profit on CSR, and lots of companies are at a loss, have no idea how to spend it, because they want to spend it on something useful for themselves, but they end up with doing some marketing exercises with hospitals and orphanages. So lots of things that can be done for them in the CSR sector. Ali?
Thank you. My name is Ali. So on the product and versus project approach, interesting panel there, because we have both pure business firms and also think tanks sitting. I was wondering how they would like to respond to it. My own assessment is that there is a fundamental difference between how, of course, think tanks and a business firm would operate. A business firm would be, whether it's a large firm such as Ayesha or a small retail store, they would have to have a long-term vision, and they would not be worrying about, let's say, short-term impacts. They would measure their result to success over a long-term horizon. They want to sustain and grow. In think tanks, from day one we are trained to talk about like impacts which are related with projects which are necessarily short-term in nature, media impact or policy impact, and that may be introducing an inherent bias against a long-term approach in the think tanks. For your thoughts.
Thank you. Anybody wants to respond? Robin?
Well, I mean, my quick response to that would be, Ali, I mean, in addition to what you're saying, I do agree with you on that for businesses, the longer term is what matters, right? So primarily in the initial 5 years, we don't really even care if they're making profit or not, if they're, kind of building a good reputation. So I kind of agree with you on that. But then one fundamental difference I see between non-profit work and for-profit work is on a non-profit, it's very hard for us to figure out whether we made an impact or not. That's one of the most challenging things when wearing a think tank hat. So how do we measure it? And there are so many different ways of it. And sometimes, measuring our impact is much more expensive than the project itself, and it doesn't make sense to me. But at the for-profit, it's very simple. There is this stupid things called numbers. They are denominated. So either we are making a loss or we are making a profit, and that is our health check. Every year, every quarter, we look at the bottom of the statement, and that our health check. If we are not break even, making break even, or if we are not making profit, then we have to correct. So I think that is an advantage in doing business. We have an instant health check.
Yes.
If you can make a short-term impact straight away, we take that. So, but I think you have to be also realistic, and you have to have the mix between what is your vision as a think tank, what is your long-term objective, by also achieving sort of short-term intermediate goals to show some kind of, maybe not impact, but result or outcome. As I mentioned earlier, these days reports, if they're not being read, then what is the outcome of a long report which is being done over 12 months and no one is actually going to read that? Versus a study which is a 5-page study over 3 months, but you are able to distribute it on social media network and it gets actually publicity. So I think everyone has to find sort of that balance between what is really the long-term vision someone has versus what are the sort of intermediate steps of trying to create that impact and some visibility on results.
Let me get two voices first from there, and then we'll take it back to the panel. The Danana, I think, was first. Do we have a microphone here for the front? Danana and the gentleman at the same table. And Danu a little later.
What's the question to Robbie?
The easiest if you leave the microphones always on. Just don't switch them off.
Question is, when you have a non-for-profit and profit, have you met any experiences with conflict of interest? For an instance, you do sort of you push for a policy on pharmaceutical, and someone also comes and do sort of a HR research or a data mining exercise on pharmaceutical. How do you manage those situations? Is my question. Just sharing an experience with Advocata. What we did was, rather than opening it for like a for-profit channel, we went for an agreement with an event company, a business magazine for events. So they outsource, it's a profit-sharing model where we organize the event. So we use our network to bring people, promote the event, and percentage is going to the business magazine, which will also build their reputation because they are not capable of managing events. And the other half will be contributed to Advocata. So that's one thing that we did. So rather than we are competing or before going for conflict of interest, we generally get a percentage based on the success of the event. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And that has been profitable. That has brought in some money.
That has been so far profitable.
Okay, very well. Before you answer, we get the second question or comment. Could you kindly introduce yourself?
Yeah. This is Benu. I'm from India. I have a sort of a blended here, both questions and comments. That why should think tanks exist? I think Keitel's made a very good point. Is it for something for some sort of a transactional things, Or in my mind, it is, apparently, coming up, is it for transformative, some solution? What Tom was presenting, that when you have a question and you have a solution, then you come up with, a think tank like that. Because if you can get it done through the consultant or some other research body, there are a lot of, public sectors, research bodies, those who are also doing work. So finding a sort of a role space where I should, put my positioning, I should say that positioning the think tank amongst the different actors who are already operating in the national policy space, where I should, put my, and Ayesha made a very good point that, donors are giving money and then afterwards they get a report, but ultimately, who are your consumers? Who are your customers? Customers are here, but they are not paying anything. So what is the stake they are having it? So how I create a stake where I can recover the money, and that is what I was talking to Arvind. Money is not the problem. Corporate CSR, Nupur has correctly, I know all the corporate sectors in India because I was working with them in NABARD, private sector, public sectors, community-based organization. Money is not the problem. They are looking for some sort of good solution. At the same time, think tanks are there. They should come up with certain good idea, transformative idea, which can make real transformative solutions where you can create a bigger constituency. So that's what I find that in many cases, if we do some sort of a retail, questioning and retail answer, perhaps, think tanks will not be very effective and efficient. So I would like to get your comments. What sort of a transformative solutions, when you are setting up a think tank, you would be looking forward from your own experiences?
Thank you very much. So that plays very much into the previous presentation by Tom Palmer, saying quite clearly, so who are we? So what is our product? How we are in the market? What's our position? What are we adding? What's the value that we're adding?
So, thank you, Sansi. Yeah, so the way I see it is that I don't think, if I think about Prime and Pakistan and our position there, I don't think we're there to provide any solutions. We're just there to basically bring out discussions, get people talking, make them aware about what are the possible solutions to the challenges and the problems that the government or the people are facing. So we don't necessarily give any solutions, but we give that platform, we give that bridge for the government sector and the policymakers to understand the common people and the common problems. So that nuisance value is created through the media and also through our op-eds, through our research. So this is where I see Prime, and this is how we work on this. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Robin.
Well, I quite agree with you, Benu, on your comment. I think we as think tanks have to clearly position on what we want to do. And I think each of us in our own little ways, we're trying to do that. And I think it's quite relevant what Tom was saying about our own viability and our own products. So so acknowledging your comment, I'll move on to Dhanaraj. Dana, who is actually asks a very interesting question and a very sensitive question, which I've been living for a lot of time in managing these businesses. I was not able to come to the challenge side of it, limitations of time, but there are definitely a lot of challenges in trying to manage these multiple organizations or companies. One of the biggest challenges, people will start looking at your face and getting confused. So who are you? Are you a think tank guy, or are you that company guy, or are you that data guy, or are you that? And so that's a big confusion. You start losing your identity, and you start sending wrong signals in the market, right? And so we have a process in place on that, and I'll be happy to talk about more on that. When it comes to conflict of interest, we have a process in place. We experienced it, and we have a process in place on how we resolve conflict of interest. More than the conflict of interest, when you have multi-companies that stem out of one company, there are issues of domain conflict, what we call. More than conflict of interest, it's domain conflicts. What I'm trying to say by that is, a company approaches me, a company approaches one company saying, would you do a research? But all three companies have different areas of doing research, right? And then all the business companies, they have a pressure on they have numbers that they have to meet at the end of the year. They have targets, right? And so they might be tempted to take up this research, which probably another company is supposed to be doing, right? And then that starts creating conflict of interest and what we call the domain conflict in our way. So we have a process on that, on domain conflicts. We have defined on who will take up what. So say, for example, wearing somebody the hat if we get a request for a video, we exclusively get the videos produced only through Onion Films. If the Onion Films is not available, they will have to figure out who is going to produce. That's not our job. So that's how we settled it up.
So the answer is there's potential problems, but
Yes.
you need
Yes.
processes in place,
Yes.
and we can maybe go into that a little deeper later. Gulmira, you also had a question or a comment earlier.
Just for a previous question, that being non-profit, it doesn't mean that you don't need money or you don't need to raise. For me, it's a main difference between for-profit and non-profit organizations. That for profit organizations, you measure your success with money. We measure our success with what reform we bring, what change we bring for a society. But it's all of these changes, we need money, and so we work as we use model of a profit organization to promote our ideas. It doesn't mean that we are we just don't divide our profit between owners or our workers. That's the reason when we talk about our identity. We always sell. We're simultaneous and difference between like consulting organizations. We promote. We have our values. We promote our vision. We work for our mission. And to achieve this mission, to achieve our vision, we need to work. We need to do some. Do some work for our sustainability. We can't depend, because we always say about independence is that we are non-profit. We don't have like other interests whom we work. But to save this independence, to be able to work for your mission, you need to make money to do it. That's why we always openly say that we have some commercial part. We do some research. We do research about we can do just to make it clear for everyone. So you can order as it's just a part of business, but it's just a small part. And just clarify not for others. First of all, you should clarify for yourself, because we also faced some 2 years ago when we just started to make some profit for our sustainability that you can forget about your main goal, what you're doing. And we just clarified that just 20% of our income can come from our service which we provide, from our research, from like data and others. So just to clear for yourself, and then it will be for others.
Right. Thank you very much. Very interesting. So a clear 20/80 rule for that. Juergen.
And maybe to add to these points here, I think everyone has to also realize every situation is a little bit different. Every region, every country is very different. You have to understand really the local environment. However, there are sort of certain topics within the industry which have a common theme. We just heard actually was very interesting about the CSR problem. It seems to be the same issue in India like in Indonesia, completely different mindsets. So I think in the aviation industry we have something similar. We are fully aware in their studies that sort of more open aviation market competition creates lower cost and creates better connectivity and so on. So those are the themes which then can be picked up, because those are the themes which can then actually be sort of approached from an independent point of view, from creating sort of the different stakeholders to come together and have an understanding how to find a solution.
And when it comes to money, it also has another dimension. Just yesterday, I spoke to a potential donor of us, and one of the first questions, in the middle of the conversation, the question was, so what is actually your annual budget? Because money also means how strong, how powerful you are. And it matters how big you are, because for some donors, you might be out if you have the too small a budget. So money actually does matter quite a bit. Yeah.
We talking about that we can get money just through research, but it's all other ways, because we are not doing just research. We're doing like advocacy campaign and like different events. where
Yeah.
you also can fundraise.
Sure, I mean participant fees, etc. But you have Gulmira, you have another interesting way of going about it, and that is when you are following the business people and help them in developing something in their own villages where they are from. Can you explain that a little bit?
Before, when I think all our countries face the same, that like the nation culture of Western countries and like Asian countries, they are different. And before we thought that it's a problem that people, they don't donate, but it's not true. In our countries they donate, but it's different, and we need to understand how they do it. When we use this like guidelines that we are making proposal, we're writing and explaining all this like bigger picture how it is, but it didn't work. And we changed our strategy, and we understood that in Kyrgyz culture, for example, they donate, but they donate for their own village, they donate for their own hometown. They don't think about whole country. So we identify these people, these businessmen, and now we're working. We raised, I think, $40,000 for one village for 3 types of projects: for decentralization, for entrepreneurship, and for education project of youth. Sometimes business, they don't donate by money, but they're just, for example, we have agreement. It's a total budget of 40,000, but it's not like giving us with money. But they will cover all our costs, for example, to getting this village, our staying, our materials, and everything. So I'm totally agree what Tom said before. You don't need to for begging, because when we are meeting with businessmen and we are telling about that what we are doing, and first question what I always hear, it's like, what do you want from me? And when you're saying, yeah, I want from you like $5,000, $10,000 for this project, they're not very interested, because you're like, he already met 100 person who already asked for money. It's not only like think tanks, it's they're surrounded by people who need money. And that's the reason why you need to show that they're interested. So what do you want to do? So they started to tell about the stories, that village, that they want to grow their village, they want to like make some impact for their community. And we came with solution what we can do for them. And we didn't ask for money, we didn't talk about project at first. We decided to go with them to their village and look at the situation there. Will they accept us? What we really can do for them. So we didn't use our like prepared project to them. We did like primary research. We identify what their needs. And we created project especially for this village and for this region. And now we're like working with them. It's a project for next 2 years. And it's very interesting how it's like raising it just for one village. But then they started talking, and we get interest from other regions as well. But they're waiting when our like pilot project will run. And we decided not to make for all these regions, but finish with one village and then run to another. Because yeah, we have now like proposals to give us money, but we need to make sure that we can handle it. Because we have also not just limited financial resources, but we also have limited human resources, which is more important. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Danu, Raj, you also wanted to ask or comment. Can we have a microphone to the table here, please?
Hello. Yeah. I'm Dhanu Raj from Center for Public Policy Research, India. This is not a question, the comment, sharing my experience in the last 14 years. I think a lot depends on, what's the value system that, we bring on the table as a non-profit organization, a for-profit organization. And I see whenever I talk to our friends here, I think many of them are doing profit, but they don't realize that they're doing a profit thing. I don't find the difference between profit and non-profit most of the times during the last 14 years. Especially in a country like India, I think the exemptions that you get, that's what many are behind non-profit idea. These exemptions are very much limited now. We don't have that many exemptions that were there 14, 15 years back. And today, I pay tax. At the same time, right against the government policy of taxation. That's two different things. I comply with the tax regulations in India. At the same time, I criticize tax regulations or tax system in India. That's one thing. Second, I believe, as an organization, you should decide on who could be your client, who could be your partner, who could be your funder, what kind of project you want to get into. And is the money that attracts you to that project? Is the profile of the client that attracts you to the project? I think once you reach that level, you should be convinced about what you're doing. Why are you into this business? And I strongly believe we have a mission too. There's a mission that we have to attain. So in order to reach that mission, whether you get into a non-profit platform or profit platform, I don't care. And third point I wish to share, is treat it as a startup company. I see so many budding think tanks here. I treat them as startup culture, startup companies. And when you set up a company, you have so many regulations, you have so many compliances that you have to go through, and you give them insights to what way we could do, how we overcome those challenges. So whether profit or non-profit, again, for me, at least in my personal level, I don't categorize whether they are profit or non-profit. And one question to Robin, I think it's also imperative. I think very important to take those decisions in terms of some companies are failing. Are we ready to admit and shut down those companies? Because I see in many, especially in corporate culture, they are not ready because it's a dream. It's a very fancy idea that they came up with. And after 2 years down the line, you realize that it is not working out the way you expected. But still, you're not reluctant to, shut it down. I've done it, some of the profit thing. And looking back, I realized that they were the best decisions I had. And the other point I see, when we started 15 years, 14 years back, I think the consensus on the board was that we are here to we are here to stay. No matter what happens, no matter who is going to support you, who is not going to support you, what kind of projects you are going to get into. But the thing is, we want to get into the reform agenda. We want to promote the liberal agenda. So I think that value that from the day first, what we incorporated in our operations, I think that really helped us a lot. I see many organizations in India, they are very they're scared of being admitted to admit that they are profit. And profit platforms also widens your platforms, extends your platforms in terms of you could work with consulting companies. You could also build larger network. You meet more HNIs there. You could also the differentiation. I think we many times we fail to understand what product we are promoting. For us, we are very clear. We are a team of researchers promoting liberal agenda, the liberal market agenda. Those who are into activism and all, I'm not so sure whether the profit angle will help them in activism. But so the product segmentation is very important in terms of how do we position ourselves in the larger market. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lanu. We've been having this conversation about company models. I want to reiterate that Tanu, in addition to CPPR, Tanu has been operating a consulting company, and it's been a wonderful model. We continue to discuss this around. We also have a gentleman called by the name of Aniket Dugar here in the room. Aniket, are you around somewhere here. Oh yeah, so behind around the T area. Aniket has a startup, I would say. It has a company that's 2 years young, and they have about 80 full-time staff and 5,000 female members who work on their company on a commission basis, and it's a social cause-driven company called Hak Darsak. And it's very interesting, the service that they're providing, and you know, it's pretty much like the non-profit work that they're doing, but then they have a solid revenue model around it, whereby the 3,000 women volunteers that work with them are able to, you know, help villagers for a small fee and send back a small portion of it to Aniket's company. So I wanted to mention this because a lot of us sitting in this room have been experimenting with, you know, private businesses or you know, profit model or whatever we would like to call it. But then at the same time, there is no doubt that it is about taking risks, and not all companies succeed. And I've been a part of several companies, and probably 50 companies by now, and many of them have died. But then what really happens is, you know, for us who try to make a case for market, right, for market and private enterprises and private businesses, you know, if we have had some experience with private businesses, it adds on to the rigor of the discussion, where we can always talk from first-hand experience. You know, when I go to policymaker, I can tell them what a sit time I went through when I was 16 and was trying to register a tea estate. It took me 7 months. So that experience is going to be of quite use for us who are making case for the private market. But then also, you know, the failure part, which even in the last few years, out of the several companies I told you, there are a few companies I didn't mention that we had to close down because what we thought was true wasn't true when we tasted the waters. And but then all in all, doing these you know, small companies is always rewarding. And even if there is a failure, I mean, the lessons that it brings to us, the rational human it develops us into, the logical person it makes you become, and the humility it teaches you is really rewarding, not the money.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Yep, you want to share?
Maybe to add one more point, because there was a discussion around funding and values. I think, yes, funding is important, but also from the private sector, it's always important that a think tank provides this thought leadership, this independency, and has that value towards society as well. Has that pillar. So I think that is also a very important notion, that there is this component of leadership, there is this component of progression, whatever the agenda might be. It could be liberalism, and that should be kept independent, and that should be sort of also one of the mindsets around the value of think tank. Otherwise, think tanks become shark tanks, and
we've had that already. Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. If I may add here something, there's actually also another way of starting a think tank, and that's the other way around. You don't go first with a think tank and then you think about how to start a company to help with the finances. But you can actually start with the company first and then think about the think tank. That's actually something that might be helpful. Is that the way you've done it, Danu? Yeah, it's the way I have done it as well. To start with the company first helps in the sense that you become very sensitive to the market. You get much more customer oriented because you have to, it's your survival. You become focused on your product, the quality of your product. So there's a couple of lessons that you learn, and you make a little bit of money that you need when you initiate the think tank, because you have to start from somewhere. So that's something, I know some in the room here are in the process of starting. So that's actually something that's quite helpful in the founding phase of a think tank, worth to consider. I would like to give one last round to all of the 4 panelists. If there's something that you still want to share after we've gone through these discussions here, final word of advice to the think tank leaders here, things you tried that did work, things you tried that didn't work, things that we haven't spoken about yet, something you would like to add. Ayesha, you want to get started?
Yeah. So, although I don't have a lot of experience in think tank world right now, but I would just like to share that going through the project way is much simpler and easier, and you have these direct outputs, and you have to, of course, creating an impact is not that easy, but generally that's the approach that most of the startups take. But I think if you have the capacity, we should go with products, because products really help us align our mission, and they help us achieving our overall goal, and they are the right key towards sustainability. So if we have the capacity, we should go for products and achieve more sustainability in that way. Yeah.
Thank you. And my only request is, like I was telling earlier, I'd like to urge all our think tank leaders here to, if you're not a part of profit-making private business, there is no harm in trying one. And if you don't want to try, you could invest in someone who is trying to open a new business. Honestly, it's a very good thing to do, because the only industry that makes real wealth is the private businesses. So I really feel it's the best and the most moral way of making money, and therefore I think we should experience a little bit of it without being scared of failure. Like I said, it has a lot of lessons. Also, on a different note, I think for all of us, I just wanted to make a proposal that there are several companies or private for-profit initiatives that are also promoting the ideas, maybe in Asia as well. And we get to meet very less of them here during the conferences. It would actually be it would be great if we could meet more of them and actually have panels to understand how they are doing their everyday business, but at the same time also contributing to promoting ideas, because we have a lot of them. Examples are there are friends in Bhutan like UED. They used to be here, be in the conference this year. I don't see them. But then some exchange of ideas focused on how they've been surviving themselves on a revenue model vis-a-vis promoting idea, because it has to be a unique combination in doing that. So that's another thing that might be of use for all of us. This kind of a proposal. Otherwise, I'd really thank you for your time listening to us. But more than that, thank you for being pro-business and loving money. I love it too.
Yeah, thank you, Gulmira.
So one more thing, it's working with the board. With my organization, I still have a problem with them, because sometimes you can, for you will be easier if your board will work more on fundraising than you. So you can focus more on your products, what you do, and promote. That's why we're trying to work more with our board to make sure that it will be their mostly responsibility to bring money to work, because it's not necessarily totally agreed to go for commercial part, because we are our main ideas it's work for our mission to promote values. And also it's not only about research, or your event can be low cost, or you can make it not for free, with some fees, and make that event pay for So just for example, before we made a project which cost $20,000, $10,000, but the result was great. But then we understand the people who participated on this event, they can pay for this, and for them paid $20 per event. It's not a big deal. So they have opportunity and they're ready to pay. So that's why our budget, it's not that big as it was before, but most of our events, they work for, how would say? So we don't need we customize them, so they have fees, and this event can be for, I'm sorry, what is this word?
Raising some money through these.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it.
Okay. And I think a summary, two important points which we mentioned were think tanks can be bridges, can be facilitators among various stakeholders. I think that's very important. Always remember think tanks should be thought leaders and leaders, which we very much support as well. And lastly, especially now for this region, for Indonesia or even for ASEAN, we at Asia treat ourselves as ASEAN company, as ASEAN airline. We see a lot of fragmented activities. It would be actually also a very opportunistic and great view to have a more sort of like collaborative approach from different sort of think tanks or research institutions across the region to provide sort of that higher level message.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, this concludes this session. We have had a discussion about very technical topics. These are, I believe, crucial to all our think tanks. We need to be as innovative as we can be, looking at our context, looking at our specific situation, where we are and who we are. We need to be clear about our values, our principles. We need to be clear about our products. And we need to see how to operate. Are we actually not for profit, or are we for profit? What is it that we're really doing? And I think that was a very good conversation. I would like to give very special thanks to the Acton Institute that has donated generously to make this panel here possible. Unfortunately, Lee Schooland is out at the moment, I think. Or is Lee here at the moment? No, but she's representing the Acton Institute here because Chris Mowden, unfortunately, last minute had to be on the jury in a court in the States, still had to do that duty and was not able to travel overseas. So otherwise he would have been here. But we are very grateful for that support. We are also very grateful for the 4 panelists. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your ideas. And with this, I'm handing over to our Master of Ceremonies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes.